folks, Dr. Gilchrist here. I have relocated. Part of the reason I did is because the Wi-Fi at Cotty is way, way better than my Wi-Fi at home, especially when certain people are also watching streaming hockey games. So I thought I'd come here. There's one other thing that I wanted to talk about with respect to learning and conditioning, and I didn't really have any slides for this, but I do want to talk a little bit on some of the biological constraints and the cognitive constraints that we can additionally see with learning and conditioning practices. So with respect to the biological constraint aspect, um, I'm curious, is there any food out there that you potentially have gotten sick from and then you can never have that food again? For me, that was actually prime rib, and I tried it once, got very, very sick later that night, and I would not try prime rib again for a good maybe 15 years after that. So what's kind of interesting is that I only had to get sick once, and I was avoiding it for a very long time afterward. Now, in general, based on what we know with classical conditioning, this should not happen. You should not have this kind of learning after one particular trial. We talked about the importance of repetition. This whole phenomenon where we get sick and avoid something is referred to as taste aversion. And it really doesn't necessarily fit with a lot of what we understand about classical conditioning. And what's even more interesting is I don't exactly know how I specifically got sick. It could have been from the broccoli that was my side dish. It could have been from a contaminated water glass. It could have been from the silverware. It could have been something having nothing to do with the restaurant that I ate at. But for whatever reason, when we get sick, we associate that with food. And in particular, we associate that with a novel food that we've never ever tried before. And in that case, I'd had broccoli before, I'd had potatoes, but I'd never had prime rib. So I got sick. My brain goes, oh, this is the prime rib that did it. So be aware that that doesn't necessarily fit with what we understand about learning and conditioning. Additionally, we do know that with respect to operant conditioning, if you want to train an animal to do a certain behavior, it's really important to think about what you're trying to do. Do you want the animal to engage in fear-based behaviors? Are you trying to get them to do reinforcement? So for example, if I teach a pigeon to peck for food, that's going to be a lot easier than if I teach pigeons how to flap their wings for food. And part of the reason for that is that pecking is what pigeons normally do to get food anyway. So it's biologically linked to the reinforcer. Flapping wings is an escape behavior. It has nothing really to do with getting food at all. And so if you're training a pigeon to flap its wings for food, you're going to find that it's really, really hard to do. Now, if you're getting a pigeon to avoid a foot shock, flapping its wings is actually pretty good because that's an escape-based behavior based on fight or flight. On the other hand, pecking for stopping an electrical shock, a lot harder because pecking is for getting food. Now, let's talk about those cognitive constraints really quickly. One of the things that's kind of interesting is that learning and conditioning, by and large, is a behavioral thing. We're solely talking about the role of the environment and not really talking a lot about what's going on in here. And it turns out that you engage in a lot of mental processes that are not necessarily observable to the naked eye. For example, Coleman's work on cognitive maps shows that when we're trying to get the spatial layout of a place, our brain is starting to form a map of the world around us, and that's not something that you can necessarily see. Coleman showed that we do a lot of learning that isn't necessarily observable to the naked eye. Additionally, your motivation plays a role. Some of us are extrinsically motivated. We're motivated by outside factors. Some of us are intrinsically motivated. We like doing something for the sake of it. And it turns out that reward can actually decrease behavior if you're intrinsically motivated. So in this particular case, reward can actually reduce behaviors. So if I really, really like to paint because it's fun for me, and then somebody starts paying me money for every painting that I produce, that's actually going to make me like it less, and I'm actually probably going to start painting less. Because now it's not about liking to paint, it's, oh, somebody's paying me to do it. I guess I don't like it that much. So be aware of these different types of constraints. Read about them a little bit more in your book. Let me know if you have questions, and hopefully these videos will be on YouTube pretty quickly. See you later.